You've discovered that the soul's journey doesn't end when you sit in lotus position. Carl Jung spent decades studying spiritual seekers, and what he found made his blood run cold. The ego doesn't die on the spiritual path. It transforms into something far more dangerous. It becomes invisible. And right now, you might be carrying this disguise without even knowing it. Let me tell you what Jung realized. Most people think spiritual growth means destroying the ego, cutting it out like a tumor. But Jung discovered something darker. The ego is a shapeshifter. When you meditate, when you read sacred texts, when you attend retreats, the ego doesn't leave. It hides inside those very activities. It wears spirituality like a mask. And here's the twist that will keep you watching. This trick is so subtle that the more spiritual you become, the harder it is to spot. Think about your own journey for a second. You started meditating. You read the books. You cleaned up your diet. You felt yourself changing, growing, becoming more aware. But Jung would ask you one question. Who is it that feels proud of all that progress? Who is it that notices how much more awake you are compared to others? That's not your higher self talking. That's the ego, and it just pulled off its greatest illusion. Jung called this trap inflation. Imagine a balloon filling up with gas. It gets bigger and bigger, and from the outside it looks impressive. But inside it's just air. When you start your spiritual journey, you gain knowledge. You learn about chakras, about shadow work, about consciousness. And with each new concept, that balloon inflates. You feel special. You feel chosen. You look around at people still caught in materialism, still chasing money and status, and you think you've transcended all that. But you haven't. You've just traded one form of ego for another. The spiritual ego is sneakier because it's wrapped in the language of humility and love. Here's how it actually happens. You wake up one morning and decide to change your life. You're tired of the emptiness, tired of the rat race. So you turn to meditation. Day 1 feels hard. Day 10 feels impossible. But then, around day 30, something shifts. You feel calmer. You sleep better. People notice you're different, and this is where the trap opens wide. You start identifying as a meditator. You join communities. You post about your practice. You talk about your insights. And slowly, without realizing it, meditation stops being a tool for growth. It becomes a badge you wear. It becomes proof that you're better than you used to be. Proof that you're better than them. Jung saw this pattern repeat in every spiritual tradition. The seeker starts humble, genuinely wanting to grow. But the ego is patient. It waits. It watches. And when you're deep enough into the practice, when you've invested enough time and energy, it strikes. It whispers in your ear. Look how far you've come. Look how much you know. Look at all these people still asleep. And suddenly you're not on a spiritual path anymore. You're on an ego trip disguised as enlightenment. Consider a composite case profile that Jung would have recognized instantly. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of someone who begins their spiritual journey with genuine intention. This person discovers meditation after years of corporate stress. They attend their first retreat. The silence terrifies them at first. Their mind races with deadlines and emails. But by day 3, something breaks open. They cry during meditation. They feel connected to something larger. They return home transformed. Within weeks, they quit their job. They train to become a meditation teacher. They change their diet, their wardrobe, their entire identity. Their friends notice the change. Some are inspired, others feel judged, because this person can't stop talking about their transformation. Every conversation becomes a teaching. They reference their practice constantly. They speak in new vocabulary, presence, mindfulness, shadow work, and beneath it all, there's a subtle current of superiority. When their friends complain about work stress, they suggest meditation. When someone shares a problem, They offer spiritual platitudes. They've stopped meeting people where they are. They're too busy trying to pull everyone up to where they think they've climbed. This is the pattern Jung observed repeatedly. The spiritual seeker becomes a spiritual teacher before they've done the real work. And the real work isn't learning concepts. It's integrating them. It's living them when no one's watching. It's staying humble when everything in you wants to feel special. The inflation happens so gradually that you don't notice it. One day you're reading a book about consciousness. The next day you're explaining consciousness to others. And somewhere in between, you stopped being a student and started being a guru. But here's what you missed. The greatest teachers are the ones who never stop being students. They never arrive. They never claim to have figured it out. They stay curious. They stay humble. They know that the moment you think you know, you've stopped growing. Let me give you 3 signs that this trap has already closed around you. Sign 1 is judgment. You look at people scrolling through social media, binging Netflix, eating junk food, and you feel a quiet sense of superiority. You might not say it out loud, but you think it. They're asleep. I'm awake. That thought, right there, is the ego wearing a spiritual costume. True growth doesn't create separation. It creates compassion. If your spirituality makes you feel above others, it's not spirituality. It's arrogance with better vocabulary. And here's what makes this so dangerous. The judgment feels righteous. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. You're not being mean. You're being discerning. You're seeing reality clearly. You've done the work to wake up, and these people haven't. You're simply observing the truth. But Jung would tell you to look deeper. Why does their unconsciousness bother you so much? Why do you need them to be asleep for you to feel awake? Because real consciousness doesn't need contrast. It doesn't need someone else to be less than so you can feel more than. When you catch yourself judging someone's level of awareness, you're not operating from consciousness. You're operating from ego. And the ego loves hierarchy. It loves ranking people. It loves knowing exactly where it stands on the ladder of evolution. The judgment shows up in subtle ways too. You're at a family dinner and your relatives are talking about their jobs, their mortgages, their kids' soccer games, and you feel bored. You feel above it. You want to talk about deeper things, consciousness, purpose, the nature of reality. But Jung would ask you this: who decided that talking about consciousness is deeper than talking about soccer games? Who decided that your interests are more evolved than theirs? Maybe the real consciousness is being able to sit at that dinner table and genuinely care about your nephew's soccer tournament. Maybe the real growth is showing up for ordinary life without needing it to be spiritual. Sign 2 is seriousness. You've lost your sense of humor. You take yourself so seriously now. Every conversation becomes a teaching moment. Every interaction is a chance to share your wisdom. You can't just laugh at a stupid joke anymore because you're too busy analyzing the unconscious patterns behind it. Jung said, the shadow loves seriousness because it keeps you from seeing the joke. And the joke is this: the person who thinks they've transcended the ego is usually the person most controlled by it. Enlightenment doesn't make you heavy. It makes you light. If you can't laugh at yourself, you're not awake. You're just inflated. Think about the last time you made fun of yourself. Not self-deprecating humor where you put yourself down. Real humor where you acknowledged your own absurdity, your own contradictions, the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. If you can't remember, that's a problem, because humor requires perspective. It requires you to step back and see yourself clearly, and the spiritual ego doesn't want you to do that. It wants you locked in the story of your transformation. It wants you serious, committed, devoted, because the moment you laugh at the whole thing, the spell breaks. Let's explore a narrative illustration that demonstrates this point. Picture someone who has been on the spiritual path for 5 years. They've read all the books. They've attended the workshops. They've done plant medicine ceremonies. They speak fluently about non-duality and the illusion of self. One day, they're driving, and someone cuts them off in traffic. They explode, they scream, they honk, they tailgate the other driver for 2 blocks, and then, as the rage subsides, they feel a wave of shame, because that reaction doesn't fit the image. The awakened person doesn't lose their temper in traffic. So instead of just accepting that they got angry, they spiritualize it. They tell themselves it was a release, an energetic clearing. The universe showing them a pattern they still need to work on. They journal about it. They talk to their spiritual community about it. They turn a simple moment of road rage into a cosmic lesson. But here's what they miss. The anger wasn't the problem. The inability to just be human about it was the problem. A person who isn't trapped in spiritual ego would have a different response. They'd get angry, recognize it, maybe laugh at themselves and move on. They wouldn't need it to mean something. They wouldn't need to justify it or spiritualize it or turn it into growth. They'd just acknowledge that they're a person who sometimes gets angry in traffic, and that's okay. That's human. The spiritual ego can't tolerate ordinariness. It needs everything to be meaningful. It needs every experience to be a lesson. It needs constant proof that you're evolving. But real evolution doesn't need proof. It just happens, quietly, in moments you don't even notice. Sign 3 is the Messiah complex. You feel called to save people. You see suffering everywhere, and you want to fix it. You want to wake people up, heal them, guide them. Sounds noble, right? But Jung would ask you to look deeper. Why do you need to save others? Is it really about them, or is it about you? Because when you position yourself as the healer, the teacher, the awakened one, you're creating a hierarchy. You're putting yourself above the people you claim to serve. True healing doesn't come from someone who thinks they're above suffering. It comes from someone who knows they're still in it, still learning, still stumbling. The moment you think you've arrived, you've lost the path. We see this dynamic clearly in another composite example, based on patterns Jung recognized throughout his work. Consider someone who becomes a spiritual coach. They've had their own transformation. They've overcome addiction or depression or a difficult childhood, and they want to help others do the same. Beautiful intention. But somewhere along the way, something shifts. They start seeing themselves as different from their clients, more evolved, further along the path. They give advice from a place of certainty instead of solidarity. They have answers instead of questions. And their clients feel it. They feel the distance. Because real healing happens in relationship. It happens when 2 people sit together in the mess and the mystery. It doesn't happen when one person stands above the other with solutions. The Messiah complex is seductive because it feels like love. You genuinely want to help. You see people struggling with the same things you struggled with, and you want to save them from that pain. But here's the truth Jung understood. You can't save anyone. People save themselves. Your job isn't to rescue. Your job is to witness, to hold space, to remind people of their own power. The moment you position yourself as the savior, you've robbed them of their own journey, and you've inflated yourself into someone you're not. The Messiah complex also protects you from your own pain. As long as you're busy fixing everyone else, you don't have to look at what's still broken in you. As long as you're the helper, you don't have to be the one who needs help. It's a beautiful defense mechanism, and the ego uses it brilliantly. You get to feel useful, needed, important. You get to avoid your own shadow by staying focused on everyone else's. But Jung knew that sustainable healing only comes from addressing your own wounds first, not fixing them completely, not transcending them, just acknowledging them, sitting with them, learning to live with them. Now here's where this gets really dark. Jung discovered that people trapped in spiritual ego don't just stagnate, they become dangerous. Think about it. If you believe you're spiritually superior, if you believe you've transcended the darkness that plagues normal people, what happens when you do something cruel? When you lie, manipulate, or hurt someone, you don't see it as wrong. You justify it. You tell yourself it was for their growth. You were teaching them a lesson. You were holding up a mirror. The ends justify the means because you're operating from a higher level of consciousness. This is how spiritual teachers abuse their students. This is how gurus build cults. They genuinely believe they're beyond the rules that govern ordinary humans. They believe their shadow is gone. But shadows don't disappear. They just get bigger in the dark. Jung called this shadow repression. The brighter you try to shine, the darker your shadow becomes. Imagine standing in sunlight. The stronger the light, the sharper your shadow. Spiritual seekers focus so hard on the light, on love and peace and higher consciousness, that they ignore the shadow completely. They push it down. They deny it. And the shadow grows in the basement of their psyche, feeding on everything they refuse to acknowledge. Anger, jealousy, lust, greed, shame, all the messy human stuff that doesn't fit the spiritual image. Eventually, that shadow explodes. And when it does, it's catastrophic, because the person who thought they were holy can't reconcile their darkness. They can't admit they were wrong. So they blame others. They project. They create enemies. They split the world into light and dark, good and evil, awake and asleep. And they always put themselves on the side of the angels. Let's examine a case profile that illustrates this shadow mechanism. Consider the pattern of a spiritual teacher who presents themselves as purely loving and compassionate. They speak about unconditional love. They teach workshops on forgiveness. They have thousands of followers who see them as enlightened. But behind closed doors, they're controlling. They manipulate their inner circle. They demand loyalty. They punish anyone who questions them. And when someone finally speaks up about this behavior, the teacher doesn't take responsibility. Instead, they frame the confrontation as the other person's shadow. They say the accuser is projecting. They turn it back on them. This is textbook shadow repression. The teacher has identified so completely with the light that they can't see their own darkness, and that blindness makes them capable of real harm. Jung understood that the shadow doesn't go away just because you meditate or do breath work or attend retreats. The shadow is part of you. It's the collection of everything you've deemed unacceptable about yourself. Everything you've been taught is wrong or bad or shameful. And the spiritual path often adds to this pile. Now, you're not just rejecting your anger or your jealousy. You're also rejecting your ego, your attachments, your desires. You're trying to become pure, holy, transcendent. But Jung would tell you that's not the goal. The goal is integration. The goal is to make room for all of it. The light and the dark, the holy and the human, the awakened and the asleep. Here's what shadow repression looks like in practice. You're in a spiritual community. Everyone is kind. Everyone is conscious. Everyone speaks softly and hugs often. But beneath the surface, there's competition. There's gossip. There's judgment. People are sleeping with each other and lying about it. People are jealous of who gets to sit closest to the teacher. People are performing their spirituality for each other. But nobody talks about any of this, because that would shatter the illusion. That would admit that even in this enlightened space, humans are still being human. So the shadow gets pushed underground, and it festers there, growing stronger in the dark. This is the fatal danger of the spiritual ego. It disconnects you from reality. You start living in a fantasy where you're the hero of a cosmic story. You interpret every coincidence as a sign, every challenge as a lesson designed specifically for your growth. You lose the ability to see things as they are because you're too busy seeing them as symbols. Jung warned that this inflation leads to psychosis if left unchecked. The inflated person can't tell the difference between their ego and the divine. They start speaking in absolutes. They claim to channel higher beings. They believe their thoughts come directly from source, and everyone around them can see the delusion except them. The tragedy is that this path always starts with genuine spiritual longing. Nobody sets out to build a spiritual ego. You start because you want truth. You want to wake up. You want to be free. But the ego is clever. It knows it can't fight the spiritual impulse, so it joins it. It becomes spiritual, and it uses your highest aspirations as its disguise. This is why Jung called it the last trick. Because it's the hardest one to spot. All the other ego games are obvious once you start paying attention. But this one hides in plain sight. It wears the costume of the very thing that's supposed to free you. So how do you escape this trap? How do you walk the spiritual path without falling into the ego's disguise? Jung's answer is brutal in its simplicity. You have to stay human. You have to resist the temptation to transcend your humanity. Spirituality isn't about becoming an angel. It's about becoming a whole person. And whole people are messy. They have bad days. They get angry. They make mistakes. They eat pizza and binge stupid shows and waste time on nonsense. They don't float above the world. They live in it. They're grounded. Grounding is the antidote to inflation. You need practices that keep you connected to your body, to the earth, to ordinary life. Physical work, cooking, cleaning, gardening, walking without a destination. Things that don't produce insight or wisdom or growth. Things that just are. Because the ego feeds on progress. It wants achievement. It wants to climb higher. But the soul doesn't climb. It deepens. It roots. And roots grow down, not up. Jung believed that working with your hands was essential for psychological health. Not because it teaches you something. Not because it's spiritual. But because it's ordinary. When you wash dishes, you're just washing dishes. There's no cosmic meaning, no lesson, no growth, just soap and water and plates. And that ordinariness is medicine for the inflated psyche. It reminds you that you're not special. You're a person who needs to eat, and who makes dishes dirty, and who has to clean them. That's it. That's the whole story. Think about how different this is from the spiritual ego's approach. The spiritual ego would turn dishwashing into a meditation. It would make it meaningful. It would extract a lesson from it. Presence, mindfulness, the art of doing one thing at a time. And suddenly, you're not just washing dishes anymore. You're performing consciousness. You're proving your awareness. Jung would say, just wash the dishes. Let them be dishes. Let yourself be the person washing them. No performance, no proof. Just the simple act of taking care of your life. You also need humility, real humility, not the fake kind, where you say you're humble while secretly believing you're special. Real humility means accepting that you're not that different from anyone else. You're not more evolved. You're not closer to God. You're just a person trying to figure things out, and you're going to fail a lot. You're going to be selfish and petty and blind, and that's okay. That's human. The moment you accept your ordinariness, the spiritual ego loses its power, because it can't survive without the story of your specialness. Jung had a practice he recommended to his students. Every time you catch yourself thinking you're more conscious than someone else, find 3 ways you're less conscious. Every time you feel superior, find evidence of your inferiority, not to shame yourself, but to balance the inflation, to remember that consciousness isn't a ladder, it's not a competition, it's a practice, and you're always a beginner, always learning, always discovering new layers of your own blindness. Here's a practical way to cultivate humility. Pay attention to the people you've written off, the ones you think are asleep, the ones you judge, and ask yourself this question. What do they know that you don't? What are they good at that you're terrible at? Maybe they're better at relationships than you are. Maybe they're more generous. Maybe they're more present with their kids. Maybe they're more honest about their limitations. There's always something, and the moment you can see it, the hierarchy collapses. You're not above them, you're beside them, both of you figuring it out, both of you stumbling through this mystery called life. Finally, you need shadow work. You need to turn around and face the parts of yourself you've been running from. The jealousy you feel when someone else succeeds, the anger you hide behind spiritual bypassing, the fear that maybe you're not as awake as you think. Sit with that stuff. Don't try to heal it or transform it or love it away. Just look at it, acknowledge it, because Jung knew something essential. You can't integrate what you won't see. And integration, not transcendence, is the real goal. You're not trying to become something other than human. You're trying to become all of what you are, light and shadow, ego and soul, mess and grace. Shadow work isn't comfortable. It's not peaceful. It's not what you signed up for when you started your spiritual journey. You wanted bliss. You wanted enlightenment. You wanted to feel good. But Jung would tell you that feeling good isn't the goal. Wholeness is the goal. And wholeness includes the parts of you that don't feel good. The parts you're ashamed of. The parts you hide from others and from yourself. Shadow work means dragging those parts into the light. Not to destroy them, not to fix them, just to see them, to acknowledge that they're part of you too. Here's a simple shadow work practice Jung would approve of. When you notice yourself having a strong negative reaction to someone, ask yourself this: what is it about them that bothers me? Write it down, be specific. Then ask yourself, do I have that quality too? Your first instinct will be to say no. Of course not. I'm nothing like them. But sit with it longer. Look deeper. Because usually, the things that trigger us most in others are the things we can't accept in ourselves. The person who irritates you with their neediness might be reflecting your own unmet needs. The person who annoys you with their arrogance might be showing you your own hidden superiority. The shadow always shows up as projection first. We see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. True spirituality doesn't look impressive. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need followers or validation or proof. It's quiet. It's ordinary. It shows up in small moments, in kindness without an audience, in honesty when lying would be easier, in staying present with someone's pain instead of rushing to fix it. Jung said the goal of the spiritual path isn't to become a saint, it's to become conscious. And consciousness means seeing yourself clearly, not the version you wish you were, not the version you perform for others, but the actual, flawed, complicated person you are right now. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If you clicked on this video hoping for a technique to spot the ego's trick in others, you missed the point. The trick isn't happening out there, it's happening in you, right now. Every time you feel superior to someone less spiritual, every time you perform your growth for an audience, every time you hide behind wisdom to avoid feeling your feelings. The spiritual ego is subtle. It's almost impossible to spot because it speaks in your voice, uses your values, and claims your highest intentions. It feels like truth, but it's just another disguise. Jung spent his life studying the psyche, and he concluded that the spiritual path isn't about killing the ego. That's impossible. The ego is part of you. It's necessary. What matters is relationship. Can you have a relationship with your ego where it serves you instead of ruling you? Can you notice when it's inflating? Can you laugh when you catch yourself performing enlightenment? Can you admit when you're wrong? Can you stay small when every instinct screams to be big? The ego's last trick is convincing you that you've already beaten it, that you're past this, that this video is for beginners, not for you. You've done the work. You know better. And that thought, right there, is the trick in action, because the work is never done. Growth isn't a destination, it's a practice, and every single day you have to choose. Will you be real, or will you be right? Will you be human, or will you be holy? Will you drop the mask, or will you polish it? The goal isn't perfection. It never was. The goal is wholeness. And wholeness includes everything you've been trying to transcend. Your doubt, your fear, your pettiness, your confusion. All of it belongs. All of it is part of the journey. Jung believed that the moment you stop trying to be special, you become free. Free to be ordinary. Free to be wrong. Free to be exactly who you are without needing it to mean something cosmic. If you're ready to drop the mask and find real growth, the kind that doesn't need applause, hit the like button and subscribe for more content that cuts through the spiritual noise. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment. Tell me which sign resonated with you, because chances are you felt this trap before. We all have. That's not a failure. That's the path. The real spiritual journey isn't about arriving. It's about staying awake to how easily we fall asleep, even in the light. In the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.